Welcome to Motorcycle News. This is QJMotor's SRT450RX. It's £5,500, 46 horsepower, really high spec, small adventure bike. Could be a real thorn in the side for BMW's F450 GS and the Kawasaki KLE 500. We've ridden it for 600 miles. Let's get into what it's like to own and to ride. So when the press release dropped for the SRT450, we were really intrigued because for £5,499 in the UK, this offers a hell of a lot of value. So you've got the parallel twin motor, you've got fully adjustable suspension from Marzocchi, panniers are standard, crash bars, folding mirrors, adjustable screen, TFT dash, heated seat, heated grips, fog lights, tubeless spoked wheels, just lots of bits that I will probably miss some in all honesty. It's got such a long and interesting sort of standard spec sheet. And there was a media event for this, but we didn't want to get involved in that, so we wanted to spend a bit more time with it. We wanted to really get under its skin, so that's what we did. And at the moment we're about 650, 700 miles, something like that, since we picked it up, and we've learned quite a bit about it and really got to know it. So I'm going to dive into how this bike performs in lots of different scenarios you might use a small adventure bike for. So once we've grabbed it, the first thing I put it to was my daily ride to work. Top box came in really useful for carrying my bag, laptop, all that sort of stuff. And the bike itself really acquitted itself to just that kind of humdrum day-to-day stuff where you just want a bike to be no fuss and dependable and kind of safe if it's a bit damp first thing in the morning, as it was a few days in kind of springtime UK. A little bit of dew and overnight rain on the road. And it's really low slung for a bike like this, 835mm, but then it's also quite narrow across the tank. So getting your feet down at traffic lights, even for some of our shorter members of staff who've either thrown a leg over it or taking it for a ride, no issues with that. And for me at 6 foot, obviously very easy to do so. Riding position as well, nice naturally spaced bars. You're not kind of too wide, not too narrow forwards. It's just a really sort of natural, sort of gentle reach forward that just holds you in a nice position. And usually for me on an adventure bike, the main issue I tend to have is the seat to foot peg height. But actually the rider triangle on this is sort of relatively open in all directions. So that wasn't an issue at all because it's relatively low slung as a bike. It's not like something like the CF300 Rally where it's a little bit taller and things are sort of packed up higher. And it's just a really kind of pleasurable and sort of functional bike to day. Like I say, heated grips and seat standard, cool moorings, they've been a little bit of a godsend. And the standard handguard, bark buster things, they do quite a good job of keeping the cold blast off the back of your hands. So again, nice designed little detail. Some bikes, they don't do a great deal in all honesty. And that includes some premium big adventure bike options. So for QJ to come at this market pretty much cold and kind of nail little details like that is reasonably impressive. And then going a little bit further afield, so kind of doing longer sort of daytime and sort of weekend rides, A roads, B roads, even sort of dual carriageway and little bits of motorway, spending more than sort of an hour or so in the seat. QJ, again, it really acquitted itself, and there was a few more niggles that I discovered when doing the longer runs. Screen for me, perhaps a little bit low. It is adjustable via these little knobs at the side, nice and easy to do on the move. Doesn't sound great, so it's not the most high quality mechanism, but it does at least feel solid. So hopefully that will go the distance. Like I say, comfort, surprisingly, I expected this to be sort of fairly poor when you sort of got past sort of 45 minutes an hour or so. Quite often Chinese bikes, we've found that they have fairly soft seat foam and it compresses and you just sat on the seat base. No such grief here. Vibration, acceptable, no numb fingers, no numb feet, anything like that. And that's in spite of probably what I would say is one of its biggest flaws is the final drive gearing. 6th gear, 70 miles an hour, kind of UK national speed limit. That's 6,500 RPM, and it just feels a little bit too high in the rev range. I mean, peak torque is only 8,000 RPM, so you're kind of getting to the point where you're sort of using most of what it has. And I don't think that's there because it can't pull anymore. I think you could raise the gearing and just soften things a little bit and it'd still be absolutely fine. Flip side of that is surprisingly and probably artificially tractable, and you can hold sixth all the way down to 30 miles an hour, open it up, and it just picks up and starts driving really cleanly. And actually, even with a pillion on, one of my colleagues needed to collect a bike from the other side of Peterborough, the town that MCN is based in, 10-mile ride, and between us we were probably sort of knocking on the door of sort of 25, 27 stones, something like that, so pushing this bike right up to its payload limit. And you know what, I was expecting it to be on the floor and not able to pull forward, but that low gearing and the suspension, which we'll come to in a little while, just handled it. And so that was kind of a real sort of surprise for a small bike. You don't expect to carry big heavier pillions. Yeah, okay, your other half, if they're a bit smaller, they'll be okay on this, but the biggest limiting factor was actually the top box, because it sits quite far forward, so he wasn't able to sit further back. So there was a little bit of uncomfortable man-to-man touching, but nothing that we couldn't deal with. And I touched upon the suspension there, so I'm going to move on to that now and talk about that a little bit more. So QJMotor's parent company also own Marzocchi now. Historically an Italian company. They've been on Ducatis, Aprilias and lots of other high-end bikes over the years. And when we kind of saw that name on the spec sheet, I thought, oh, they've probably just brought in their lowest rent gear and thrown it in, hope for the best. Absolutely not the case. 41mm forks, fully adjustable. Monoshock at the back with a linkage, also fully adjustable. And I like to fiddle with suspension and find out what it's about, and I've not felt the need to touch it once for anything I've done, which is really impressive. Now, ride quality is good. It's sort of tail end of winter, moving into spring here in the UK, and our roads have absolutely been obliterated. There's potholes, ridges, ruts, lumps, you name it, it's there, ready to pound you in the backside. But this rides it out all really nicely. You've got 200mm suspension travel at both ends, which is kind of somewhere in the middle for an adventure bike. Kind of the low end is about 180mm, and some of the sort of big sort of rally inspired stuff there, sort of more like 240, 250mm. So it's acceptable, if not outstanding, but as a road bike, that's plenty enough to kind of deal with some of these, you know, kind of highway nasties that we're having to deal with at the moment. And sometimes the flip side of that is it's then too mushy and a bit wallowy and horrible when you start sort of pushing it a bit harder. But again, the spring and damping rates are really nicely chosen. It's a nice mid-ground of balancing that comfort and also supporting it. It takes quite a big handful of the front brake to really get the forks dipping. Sort of your gentle strokes on the brakes doesn't pitch the bike too forward, too hard, too soon. It's nice and controlled. It takes a really big handful before you're really getting into that fork travel. And then the shock absorber at the back as well. Now, obviously, I've been testing it a lot of the time with all the standard fit luggage on, and even if it's empty, that acts a bit of a sail, and that helps kind of load the rear. But there's been no issues with wallowing or kind of it getting a bit unstable and vague because the front tyre's unloaded. The shock's held its ground, and I mean, I'm kind of clear of 90 kilos with all my gear on. Absolutely no problem with it, and like I say, even with another heavy pillion on, no grief there at all. So again, another real sort of tick for the QJMotor. And just sort of going back to the brakes as well, it's a Brembo radial 4-piston caliper at the front. Initially when we got the bike, it got about 500 miles on and it was a bit weak. I was like, oh, they have cheaped out, they've put rubbish pads in or something like that. But actually I just think it hadn't broken in enough. Those pads need a little bit more time to mate with the disc, because that has come around and it's now really strong and what you might expect from a Brembo braking setup. Although saying that, the master cylinder, which I initially thought was Brembo, I'm fairly sure it's not, because it doesn't have the Brembo logo or B anywhere on it, so it's a copy or a facsimile of a Brembo part, but not one by all accounts. Back brake as well. I like to use a lot of back brake for pillion stuff, off-road work, and just sort of general slow speed riding. That's really good. Nice feel, nice progression as well. It doesn't sort of jump on, but there's decent power there if you need it for that kind of riding. And then I use the word off-road there. Now, there's lots of kind of different sort of shades and sort of variations of a small adventure bike, and some of them are more skewed towards off-road, some of them are pretty much a road bike with a big front wheel. This sits somewhere probably just slightly left of centre, slightly towards a more road bias. But that being said, it's a 21-inch front wheel, an 18-inch rear, and they are spoked but tubeless wheels as well. So somebody has thought about taking this bike off-road. And if you sort of take a look right down at the bottom as well, it's got a great big aluminium, quite a thick piece of metal as well, big bash guard under there. So it's not that they're not intending for you to take this bike off-road, that option is there. So that's what I did. I went trail riding with a friend for a day down at Thetford Forest, which is a good hour and a half from us, and it's kind of a really good testing ground for bikes because some of the ruts and holes and big whoops there, they really tax suspension. You get to know whether you've got ground clearance problems, things like that. And okay, it had its limitations, and that bash plate has now got a few scrapes and little rock pings and kind of a gentle dent in it, but it acquitted itself really well. I mean, for me, the limiting factor was actually the centre stand rather than the bash plate, and we'll show you a close-up of that, but I've taken some of the paint off and the feet have picked up on rocks and ruts and things. So if you're going to do a lot of trail riding, particularly if you're kind of going, including that as part of a tour, and might have a bit of weight on the back, you probably want to leave your centre stand at home because that's more of an issue than anything else. But that aside, suspension, again, really good. It sort of dealt with kind of rough stuff and sort of multiple sort of compressions one after another. Tyres, I let those down as well. In fact, I utilised the top box to take a little electric pump with me so I could let them down to sort of 20 or so PSI and pump them back up afterwards. You could do better. I'll be honest, it was quite dry and it's a kind of a dusty, gravelly sort of set of tracks and trails around there. So it probably flattered these CST tyres just a little bit, but they could be a lot worse. But by the time you get to your sort of first set of tyres, you probably want to go for something a little bit more mainstream and with a little bit more of a proven track record. Bridgestone AX41, Michelin Anarchy Wild, something like that, if you wanted to do kind of a greater skew of sort of off-road to road riding. Rider aids, it has them, ABS, traction control, those can be turned off, the ABS only at the rear. And that's one of my other sort of real little bugbears, that the electronic system is a bit difficult to get to grips with at times. Now, the more time I spent with it, you do get used to it, but it should be better really. A lot of bikes have now just a big button to mash, turn the ABS off and you're done. On this, you've only got 2 buttons to go through the menus and select things, and it's just a bit laborious, and some of the terminology as well, it's kind of lost in translation between Chinese and English. So the traction control menu gives the option of open or closed, and I would presume that open meant rear wheel is free and open to do wheel spins, but it's not. Closed is off, open is on, which sort of makes sense, but not really. It needs to be off or on. And then the ABS as well, you dip in and you switch it to off-road mode, which you think would turn it off, but it doesn't. You then have to hold the button again and wait sort of a good few seconds before it actually deactivates it, and it goes back to the main menu. And even little things like, it'll give you a light to show you the ABS isn't working, but traction control on is the traction control light on, which is kind of the opposite of pretty much every other bike out there. So when you turn it off, there's no light. So those initial sort of miles that you do, it's a little bit confusing, and you do get to grips with it, but why should you have to get to grips with little things like that when it's really easy to do? And I think that's one of those things that betrays that while China has been building kind of lots of our electronics for years, all the programming and R&D work actually falls to kind of the big companies that have been commissioning from them, and that's the little details that the Chinese still haven't caught up when they're sort of building products under their own name. But once I got to grip with those electronic settings, it actually went down pretty well, and I had sort of a good 4 or 5 hours playing in the forest, and no grief, no tumbles, anything like that, and just had a really good time. And kind of that's really what an adventure bike should do. It should allow you to kind of go and enjoy stuff wherever it is, however far away it is, and whether there's tarmac or not. So the bash plate kissed a few times, but no big issues. It's got quite good grip as well, so although it is limiting what you can kind of cover, if you've got deep ruts or kind of big rocks and things, that's when you're going to get into grief with a bike like this, pretty much like the KLE 500, which we reviewed recently as well. But the difference with this is its weight distribution is a little bit better than the KLE, I find, while it also has the same kind of qualities of that low centre of gravity, which helps it generate natural mechanical grip. So yeah, okay, I had the traction control turned off, but it barely broke free, even on these kind of fairly low rent tyres. And that also just makes it really forgiving and balanced, even things like the standing position as well. It looks like quite a big frontage, but when you stand up, you're at the narrowest part of the bike, and even having to lean forward into things, it doesn't get too wide at the front like some bikes can. Even the handlebars, I sometimes struggle with adventure bikes. They can be a little bit low and cause me to stoop or have rigid arms. This, it's on the limit, but I can deal with it, and I didn't feel the need to adjust it. Although, if you do want to adjust it, there's a really neat little sort of numbered, graded scale on the handlebar, so you can kind of put it exactly where you want and put it back, and know where it is without having to measure it yourself, which is a nice touch. And again, somebody's thought about this and put that little bit of extra R&D time into details like that. So it's an impressive package. Do we think it delivers good value? Yeah, we do actually. And particularly in comparison to some of the bikes this year, obviously there's been a lot of hype and buzz around the BMW F450 GS. They start at just short of £7,000, and for that you don't really get a great deal. So £1,500 clear of this bike before you even start adding bits and pieces to it. And I'm going to be keeping BMW's F450 GS long term before MCN this year. Really looking forward to it, and I've been joining some of the owners groups and things like that and getting to know it. And one of the big bugbears is that dealers are telling them they can't get the spoked wheels as an ex-factory option from the start, so they're going to have to buy them as an accessory later. That's going to get quite pricey. This has them as standard, so that's going to be one of those little details that might start sort of pulling buyers towards bikes like the QJ. And then as well, you've got the KLE 500, a little bit cheaper. They start at sort of £6,000 for the basic one, rising to about £6,500 for the SE. But again, that doesn't come with panniers or any of the touring accessories, heated seats. In fact, I don't think you can get a heated seat on either of those models. That's one thing that you just won't be able to match. By the time you start speccing that up, you're going to be clear of £7,000. So again, a good £1,500 over what the QJ is going to cost. And when you think of it like that, it's like, what can you do with £1,500 when you've got a bike like this? You can have a really good summer holiday. You can kind of go touring all over Europe, do bits of TET, which this would be more than capable of doing as long as it's not too wet and you're not sort of picking the rockier trails. It'd be a really sort of great dual sport on-off-road tourer. It'll kind of handle the sort of big days, just getting the miles crunched out. It'll be nice on the little back lanes. It's really easy going. It's got a nice flow to it. It's almost like a big adventure bike in lots of ways. And talking of big, we weighed it fully fueled, 206 kilos without the panniers, which add another 16 kilos before you load them. So it's not the lightest, but equally it's quite well balanced, so it's not an immediate issue. You're probably going to know about it if you have to pick it up off the floor, but that's the case with most adventure bikes. They're not lightweight enduro bikes. But sort of back to the matter of value and whether it is the kind of versatile package we think it is. It absolutely is, and after a while I really grew to like and appreciate this bike. It wasn't just another bike to test and appraise as part of my job. I kind of found myself riding it when I didn't need to. I sort of went to see for sort of friends of an evening, met them for a pint at the pub. Like I say, running around, going to get shopping and things like that. And it's just a pleasant place to be. I'm thinking about who this bike might suit as well. Now, small adventure bikes tend to have kind of three main customer groups. One is young riders, might be on their A2 licence, so the power and weight kind of suits the restrictions of their licence. In all honesty, I'm not sure that's really kind of the QJ's vibe. It's probably a little bit kind of too mature and sensible in all honesty, so I could be wrong. Let me know if you think otherwise. And then you've got people that are budget minded. They don't want to spend a great deal of amount of money on a bike, but they like the idea of having something new and want the maximum value for money. This is going to make a lot of sense for them. I mean, we've already run through the kit list. Can have a look at it sort of fully on their website and see all the bits and pieces I've probably missed, but it's an incredible amount of bike for the money, and as far as I'm aware, there's nothing else that really offers this much adventure bike for so little money. And then you've got the other side of things, so kind of riders are getting a little bit older, maybe they've had a big adventure bike in recent years and they're finding that they're just a bit too much to manage, because like we say, I mean, even these panniers and top bikes, which are not that big, they add 16 kilos of weight before you load them. So you think you could have a good sort of 50 kilos of weight added to the back of your bike, and if you're kind of feeling a little bit less kind of strong of leg and back than you perhaps once were, something like this is going to be a bit easier to handle than even a middleweight adventure bike, or especially big bikes like the 1300 GS, Multistradas, Tigers, so on and so forth. And actually that description fits one of my colleagues, Robin. Now, I was loading this up the other day and he was out there loading up his F850 GS, and he said, how are you getting on with that? And kind of quizzed me about it, because he's in the market for this, the KLE, the F450 GS, and he's going to take his time to go through all of them. But the way I explained it was, it'll do everything that you kind of expect out of your F850 GS. Okay, maybe on the motorway it doesn't have the same legs, but if you are looking for that slightly more manageable package, this is it. But you don't really lose anything else over kind of what a big adventure bike can offer. And that's probably kind of one of the sort of QJ's biggest strengths is that it doesn't feel like a small sort of tinny step up from a 125, because that can be the danger sometimes with particularly the KTM 390 Adventure. Is it's quite a fizzy, revvy little engine, and it feels like a small bike, whereas this feels like a big bike but with the virtues of kind of small bike, sort of manageable power, manageable chassis. So there's a lot to be said for it. And of course we're going to have to get on to the issues of sort of Chinese bikes. Of course we don't know how this is going to last. I'm not going to stand here and pretend, oh yeah, this will be absolutely fine for another 20,000 miles. We just don't know that yet. What I will say is in the time we've had it, I've had no sort of real grief with it in terms of mechanical stuff. One of the other QJ motors we've got on test, we do have an issue with that. We don't know what that is about, whether it's a minor thing or something bigger. I won't comment on that for now, but that's something to bear in mind. Most of the kind of issues that I've sort of spotted or picked up on have been fairly minor. So one is right here. This front mudguard is painted over flexible plastic, which kind of established manufacturers kind of learnt years ago, decades back, that that's a bad idea because it just picks off. And yeah, sure enough, as soon as it was shown a jet washer, it started picking the paint off, and before I started grabbing it with my fingernail as well. There's one nut missing off the back of the indicator there, that's vibrated off somewhere. And in all honesty, there's not a great deal else. There's a few little bits and pieces of kind of finish that look a little bit cheaper, but it is a cheap motorbike. What do you really want from it? And some bits that are good actually. The finish of the wheels looks really nice. There's kind of no sort of horrible fasteners, spacers or cheap flimsy finishes going on there. Chains, that's sometimes an issue with Chinese bikes. This is a Japanese DID, so they've not skimped on that. And it's done the 600-700 miles that I've done on it, and it's only just needing an adjustment now, which isn't the case if you've got a low rent chain going on. Tyres, again, we've already discussed those, not the ideal thing, but they could be worse as well. You probably want to wear them out at least, or get your first couple of thousand miles down before you kind of fit something a little bit more personal to you. And just there's a few other little details I think that kind of show that QJ Motor is relatively new to kind of building something in their own right rather than just copying another design from kind of more established manufacturers. Barkbusters with the indicators in, they're quite flimsy, brittle plastic, and I think if you dropped it, you'd probably smash them to pieces and your indicator would be hanging by its wire. So if you're serious about using this for all purposes and taking it off-road and maybe relying on the crash bars to keep it in one piece, you probably end up wanting to fit some aftermarket sort of bendy indicators, perhaps drill them into somewhere there and fit some more robust hand protectors to it. But these are fairly minor things, and no doubt when there's a revision of this next year, 2 years time, whenever they decide to get around to it, these little things they're going to chip away at. And in all honesty, there's probably going to be more models in this SRT450RX range, and you can just imagine those are just going to get better and better again. So for now, this is already a really, really promising rival in this class, and we're going to have a group test coming soon. If you've not seen our recent small rally style 300cc adventure test, we're going to be doing all the sort of 300 to 500cc adventure bikes in 3 different waves, and this will form part of the parallel twin grouping. There's 5 bikes in that, so we're putting it against its direct rivals, and then the winner of that, the winner of the 300 test and the winner of the roadie singles, they'll all come together for a grand finale. I think this really stands a chance of winning that parallel twin group test. I've not ridden the 450 GS yet. Carl was a little cool on it from the launch. I've ridden the KLE. It's good, but it's kind of almost a little underwhelming. It's a jack of all trades and doesn't really kind of grab you by the, well, where you want to be grabbed by and sort of scream, this is what I'm about. It's just a worthy, useful, nice motorbike. This is kind of very similar, but it's got a little bit more about it. It's got a little bit more dynamic ability, so potentially it's got the KLE beaten. Obvious comparison, CF Moto 450 MT. This is probably a more rounded machine. Again, the CF Moto is almost like a little Tenere, and it's got kind of a slightly sportier edge to it, which is great in some ways, but it's got the same pitfall as the Tenere in that the centre of gravity is reasonably high, so it's a little bit more sort of difficult to manage if you're a novice off-roader. And of course it doesn't come with any of the kit that this thing's got on it, so again this kind of scores on the value front. And then we've also got the new Moto Morini Allthrike 450, uses the CF Moto 450 engine, built in China again. We don't know about that yet, it hasn't landed with us. We're hoping to get hold of one soon and find out how it fits in with all these other bikes and then put them together for a big group test. But for now, QJ looks like a really promising option, and I'll be really interested to find out when kind of you, the buying public, start test riding and buying them. how you get on with it, because I think this is going to really be a kind of a rewarding purchase for a lot of people if it kind of lasts and goes the long run, because first impressions, up to 1,200 miles on the clock, 600 or 700 miles under my backside. It's a really strong contender, really impressed. So let's see how it fares in the group test soon. If you want to see that, make sure you hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Drop a like, drop a comment, do all that sort of stuff, and sort of stay with us. Thank you for watching. See you again next time.